presidential briefing regarding the subject of unidentified flying objects and extraterrestrial visitation of Earth. Location: Camp David, Maryland. Date was March 1981. In this meeting, President Ronald Reagan and William Casey, CIA Director, also present, the caretaker or custodian of secret UFO and extraterrestrial documents, information and artifacts, and also, 4 other CIA advisors. William Casey: Mr. President, good morning. As we discussed in February, this briefing contains some very sensational and some very classified information. This will be a real tough one to follow since the briefing starts back, historically speaking, that is, and runs up to recent times. I believe we have prepared a good chronological order of events. I'm sure you, Mr. President, will have many questions. I have asked the caretaker to conduct this briefing. He is a contract employee of the CIA and is the present custodian of the information. This information is pretty high up on the food chain. We call it ATS or above top secret. This stuff has its own classification and markings. We have a special container, special printers and copiers for this stuff. Every word of this material is printed on special paper, then placed inside special covers. The caretakers have taken special efforts to protect all of this stuff from being released inadvertently or copied by some unauthorized person. All of this material is protected by a special group of people. The caretaker is in charge of protecting this information and all of the other items associated with this information. This material is a closely guarded secret. Although the gist of the story has been out there for many years, very little of the actual truth has ever been released to the public. Some of the renegades have unearthed some truth, maybe, but most of them have been discredited. W.M. Casey: Thank you, Mr. President. I will now turn the briefing over to the caretaker. President: Okay, well, I can't wait to hear this. Let's proceed. The caretaker: Good morning, Mr. President. First of all, I would like to give you a bit of information on my background. But before that, please, Mr. President, if you have questions during this briefing, just interrupt me, sir. I have been employed by the CIA for the past 31 years. I started the caretaking status of this project in 1960. We have a special group of people whom we call Group 6, that cares for all this information. President: Well, I knew a little about this subject before. Back in 1970. Nixon had all of the good stuff and wanted to share it with some of his friends. Nixon showed me some papers. Not sure about who authored them, but they, well, something about New Mexico and other places. Nixon was pretty, well, fascinated with it. He showed me something, some kind of object or device that came from one of their craft. Something that was taken from the New Mexico crash site. I don't know if, do we know what it was? I don't think we knew, or maybe now, after 11 years, we might know. The caretaker: Mr. President, I can answer some of those questions. Do you wish for me to begin? President: Oh, well, what level is this? I mean, what was it called? I don't remember what they called this. W.M. Casey: Mr. President, code word. It's called top secret code word. This information is beyond top secret, as I said before. It has its own classification. It is very compartmentalized. The caretaker: Mr. President, as was mentioned earlier, I must say, that this briefing has the highest classification within the U.S. government. I will start with a slide presentation. I have most of this briefing on the slides, but I also have an outline that I have passed out to each person in attendance. The caretaker: The United States of America has been visited by extraterrestrial visitors since 1947. We have proof of that. However, we also have some proof that Earth has been visited for many thousands of years by various races of extraterrestrial visitors. Mr. President, I'll just refer to those visits as ETs. In July 1947, a remarkable event occurred in New Mexico. During a storm, 2 ET spacecraft crashed. One crashed southwest of Corona, New Mexico, and one crashed near Detla, New Mexico. The U.S. Army eventually found both sites and recovered all of the debris in one live alien. I'll refer to this live alien as EB-E-1. President, what does that mean? Do we have codes or special terminology for this? The caretaker, Mr. President, EB-E means extraterrestrial biological entity. It was a code designated to this creature by the U.S. Army back in those days. This creature was not human and we had to decide on a term for it. So, scientists designated the creature as EB-E-1. We also referred to it as Noah. There was different terminology used by various aspects of the U.S. military and intelligence community back then. President, do we or did we have others? The number 1 would seem to indicate we had others. The caretaker, yes, we had others. Back then, the term was EB-E, and no number designation. We'll explain how the others came into our knowledge. President, okay, sorry, I was just wondering and I guess, well, I'm sure the briefing will cover this. Please continue. The caretaker, all the debris and EB-E-s recovered from the first crash site were taken to Roswell Army Airfield, Roswell, New Mexico. EB-E was treated for some minor injuries and then taken to Los Alamos National Laboratories, which was the safest and most secure location in the world. Special accommodations were made for EB-E. The debris was eventually transferred to Dayton, Ohio, home of the Air Force Foreign Technology Division. The second crash site wasn't discovered until 1949 by some ranchers. There were no live aliens at this site. All this debris went to Sandia Army Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico. President, okay, I question, regarding the first site, how many aliens were in the spaceship? The caretaker, 5 dead aliens and 1 alive. The bodies of the dead aliens were transported to Wright Field in Ohio and kept in a form of deep freeze. They were later transported to Los Alamos where special containers were made to keep the bodies from decaying. There were four dead aliens in the second crash site. Those bodies were in an advanced state of decaying. They had been in the desert for the past two years. Animals and time got to those bodies. The remains were transported to Sandia Base and eventually on to Los Alamos. We determined both crashed spaceships were of similar design and the bodies of the aliens were all identical. They looked exactly the same. They had the same height, weight and physical features. Here are the photographs of the aliens. President, can we classify them? I mean, can we, connect them with anything earthly? The caretaker, no, Mr. President. They don't have any similar characteristics of a human, with exception of their eyes, ears and a mouth. Their internal body organs are different. Their skin is different, their eyes, ears and even breathing is different. Their blood wasn't red and their brain was entirely different from human. We could not classify any part of the aliens with humans. They had blood and skin, although considerably different than human skin. Their eyes had 2 different eyelids. Probably because their home planet was very bright. President, maybe I'm getting ahead, but do we know where they came from? Mars, our system, or where? The caretaker, yes, Mr. President, we do know where they come from. I can go into this now, or I can wait until it comes up in the briefing. President, no, please, continue. I can wait. The caretaker, thank you, Mr. President. EB-E stayed alive until 1952 when it died. We learned a great deal from EB-E. Although EB-E did not have voice organs like humans, it was able to communicate with an operation performed by military doctors. EB-E was extremely intelligent. It learned English quickly, mainly by listening to the military personnel who were responsible for EB-E's safety and care. EB-E was housed in a special area at Los Alamos and Sandia Base. Although many different military doctors, scientists and a select number of civilians studied EB-E, it never became upset or angry. EB-E helped us learn from all the items found in the 2 crash sites. EB-E showed us how some of the items worked, such as a communications device. It also showed us how various other devices worked. President: excuse me, but you were referring to this creature as an IT. Did it have a gender? The caretaker: I'm sorry Mr. President, but yes, it was male. Within EB's race they had males and females. President: okay, thank you. Please continue. The caretaker: thank you, Mr. President. EBE died of what military doctors considered natural causes. I don't think we could really state exactly why EBE died. Although we had five years to study EBE, we didn't have any standards to compare EBE's body with standard medical observations. It was difficult to lose EBE, since it was the most interesting thing we as humans could receive and study. A visitor from another planet, another world. EBE did explain where he lives in the universe. We call this star system Zeta Reticuli, which is about 40 light-years, 38.42, from Earth. EBE's planet was within this star system. President: okay, where is this in comparison to something we all know? The caretaker: well, Mr. President, our closet star is 4 light-years away. I can show you the constellation it is in. Alpha Centauri, a yellow star, is the brightest star in the constellation Centaurus, 4.3 light-years away. President: no, I wouldn't know much about astronomy. I just thought I could understand the distance. How long did it take this spaceship to get here? The caretaker: well, Mr. President, I can tell you now or we can discuss that in another briefing. As Mr. Casey said, this is a complicated subject because there are many levels of compartmentalization. This briefing is just the basic information about a visit to our planet by one particular alien race. President: well, what am I to understand? This isn't a full briefing. W.M. Casey: Mr. President, we have different levels of stuff. If we mix it up, I don't think it will make sense, nor will we have time this morning. I understand you have a busy schedule today. President: as the President of the United States, I should know everything, right, or shouldn't I? If I am to assume this was a briefing of substance, then I should hear all of it. I think this is more important than some other things on my daily calendar. But maybe I'm jumping the gun. If there are some things I shouldn't know, please tell me. W.M. Casey: no, Mr. President, I didn't mean you shouldn't know this stuff. I simply meant we should proceed in an orderly fashion as to the briefing. But it is up to you. We will not hold anything back. President: Advisor number 1, what do you think? Do you know about all this? Advisor number 1, Mr. President, yes, I was briefed many times on this subject matter. As Director Casey stated, this is a very complicated subject. I think it took me about 1 year to be fully briefed into all aspects of this matter. There are different areas. The initial crash, an investigative period, some attempt at contact, a disinformation operation to protect this matter and several other levels. President: oh, wow, I didn't realize how complicated this was. I'm new at all of this. I have a great responsibility to the citizens of this nation to make decisions based on accurate information presented by my advisors, you, all of you. I won't interfere in your presentation of this information. So, I guess, we'll proceed in the order you have chosen. I'm sorry for interrupting in this presentation, but as a person who is interested beyond belief in this, I'll just shut up and wait to ask questions. W.M. Casey: Mr. President. No, please ask any questions you wish. You are the President. We are not here to argue with you over the order of this briefing. But some things are so highly classified that this briefing is the lowest level. If you ask a question that is in a different level, then we will have to re-evaluate the audience. Advisor number 1, Mr. President. Everything we know about alien visitation to Earth is contained in 16 volumes of binders. These binders contain thousands of pages. We can give you anything you wish, but, as Director Casey said, we must evaluate the clearances of each person listening to our responses. President: Okay, I now understand. Give me whatever you want and I'll continue to ask questions. But if you need me to wait on an answer, just tell me. W.M. Casey: Okay, Mr. President, we will do that. I still don't know the entire story. I have read 1/10 of one binder and have hundreds of questions. President: Okay, let's continue. The caretaker: Mr. President, thank you for those responses. I will answer any question, if I can. But if the question is above this level, then Director Casey will have to make that decision for me. President: I fully understand, please continue. The caretaker: It took the EBE, Spaceship 9 of our months to travel the 38.42 light years. Now, as you can see, that would mean the EBE, spaceship traveled faster than the speed of light. But, this is where it gets really technical. Their spaceships can travel through a form of space tunnels that gets them from point A to point B faster without having to travel at the speed of light. I cannot fully understand how they travel, but we have many top scientists who can understand their concept. President: Well, I certainly couldn't understand the science in that. Is it a black hole? The caretaker: Mr. President, something like that, but much more complicated. President: Do they get here? No, never mind, please continue. W.M. Casey: Mr. President, I can assure we know how they do it, but we can't do it. President: Okay. The caretaker: As to some history. The original project, started back in 1947, was called Project Gleam. This project contained volumes of documented information collected from the beginning of our investigation of UFOs and identified alien craft, or IAC. The project was originally established in the early 50s by, first President Truman and then by order of President Eisenhower, under control of the National Security Council. President Truman established a group of people to handle this project. The group was called Majority 12 or MJ12. In 1966, the project's name was changed to Aquarius. The project was funded by confidential, Black World, funds appropriated within the intelligence community's budget. The recovery of these alien spacecraft led the United States on an extensive investigative program to determine whether these aliens posed a direct threat to our national security. As you might remember, Mr. President, our country openly investigated UFO sightings under Projects Grudge, Sign and finally Blue Book. The original mission of the Air Force program was to collect and analyze all reported sightings and incidents involving UFOs and then determine whether the information could be interpreted as having any bearing on the national security of the United States. Some information was evaluated with the idea of using the gained data to advance our own space technology and future space programs. About 90% of the estimated 12,000 reports analyzed by the Air Force under Blue Book were considered hoaxes, explained aerial phenomena or astronomical objects. The other 10% were considered legitimate alien sightings and/or incidents. However, not all UFO sightings or incidents were reported under the Air Force programs of Grudge, Sign, and Blue Book. In 1953, Project Gleam initiated its own investigative detail and certain sightings were reported directly under Gleam rather than one of the other projects. Project Gleam, which became Project Aquarius in 1966, was a parallel reporting system for UFO sightings and incidents. Reports collected under Project Aquarius were considered actual sightings of alien spacecraft or actual contacts with alien life forms. We recovered 2 alien spacecraft from New Mexico. Both were heavily damaged, but we were able to examine them. The 2 craft were considered technological marvels by our scientists. However, the operating instrumentation was so advanced that our scientists could not decipher it. The 2 craft were stored in a special security location in the West. We gained a large volume of technological data from these craft. Several independent scientific investigations, at the request of the Air Force and CIA, were initiated during the era of Project Blue Book. MJ-12 decided that officially the Air Force should end their investigation of UFO sightings. This decision was arrived at during the NPNN meeting in 1966. The reason was twofold. First, the United States had established communications with the aliens. The United States felt relatively sure the aliens' exploration of Earth was non-aggressive and non-hostile. It was also established that the aliens' presence did not directly threaten the security of the United States. Secondly, the public was beginning to believe that UFOs were real. The NSC felt this public feeling could lead to a nationwide panic if we disclosed everything we knew about UFOs and alien visitation. We were involved in one major operation during this time frame that involved our alien visitors. That operation is of a higher level and it will be up to Director Casey to proceed now or wait until later. W.M. Casey, we'll wait on that part of it. I haven't been fully briefed and I would like to be able to know everything about that program before trying to brief the President. Advisor number 1, I agree with Director Casey. That part of the program is really complicated and will require a full day to brief. President, okay, as I said before, Bill's the captain of this ship. The caretaker, it was felt that public awareness of these projects would have jeopardized the future space program of the United States. Releasing our secrets about UFOs and alien visitation would also cause a panic among religious leaders around the world. Therefore, MJ-12 decided that an independent scientific study of the UFO phenomena would be needed to satisfy the public curiosity. The final official study of the UFO phenomena was accomplished by the University of Colorado under an Air Force contract. The study concluded that sufficient data did not exist that would indicate that UFOs threatened the security of the United States. The final conclusion satisfied the government and allowed the Air Force to officially step out of the UFO investigating business. When the Air Force officially closed Blue Book in December 1969, Project Aquarius continued operation under control of NSC/MJ-12. The NSC felt investigation of UFO sightings and incidents had to continue in secrecy without any public knowledge. The reasoning behind the decision was this: if the Air Force continued its investigation of UFOs, eventually some non-cleared and non-briefed Air Force or DoD civilian officials would obtain the facts behind Project Aquarius. Obviously, for operational security reasons, this could not be allowed. In order to continue the investigation of UFO sightings and incidents in secrecy, investigators from CIA/DCE and MJ-12 were assigned to military investigative units with orders to investigate all legitimate UFO/IAC sightings and incidents. These agents are presently operating at various locations throughout the US and Canada. All reports are filtered either directly or indirectly to MJ-12. These agents are collecting reports of UFO/IAC sightings and incidents occurring on or near sensitive governmental installations. Many reported sightings and incidents have occurred over nuclear weapons bases. The aliens' interest in our nuclear weapons can only be attributed to the future threat of a nuclear war on Earth that could affect space. The Air Force has initiated measures to assure the security of the nuclear weapons from alien theft or destruction. MJ-12 feels confident that the aliens are on an exploration of our solar system for peaceful purposes. However, we do have information, and that is at another level, that more than one alien species are visiting Earth. President, well, that is a lot to digest. I have written down many questions. But let's take a break and come back to this. Break. President, I think we can continue now. The caretaker, thank you, Mr. President. I will continue. In the 1976 megajoules-12 report, it was estimated that the aliens' technology was many thousands of years ahead of ours. Our scientists speculated that until our technology develops to a level equal to the aliens, we cannot understand the large volume of scientific information we have gained from the aliens' craft. This advancement of our technology may take many hundreds of years. During our initial program to study the alien spaceship, we started many different projects. The first project, originally established in 1949, was to collect and evaluate medical information from the surviving alien creature, EB-1, and the recovered alien bodies. This project medically examined E1 and provided our medical researchers with many answers to the evolution theories. The next project, originally established as part of Project Gleam in 1954, became a separate project in 1966. Its mission was to establish communication with aliens. This project met with positive success and will be discussed later under a different level. Two other projects involve the test flying of an alien ship and the cross-technology between our space program and the information we obtained from E1. W.M. Casey. Now, Mr. President, we can move on to questions or different level. Which do you prefer? President: Well, I have a lot of questions, so let me ask a few and then we can move on. I guess the first question I have is their lifespan. How old is E1? The caretaker: Mr. President, the alien civilization that E came from, is what we call the in society. It wasn't a name they gave us, it was a name we choose. Their lifespan is between 350–400 years, but that is Earth years. President: Is time the same on their planet as on ours? The caretaker: No, Mr. President, time is very different on the in planet, which, by the way, we call Serpo. Their day is approximately 40 hours. That is measured by the movement of their two suns. The solar system containing Serpo is a binary star system, or two suns, rather than one, like our solar system. President: Oh, well, your answer creates more questions. Okay, as I understand it, their planet has two suns. Wouldn't that mean the planet was hot? I guess that explains their eyes, having two eyelets. The caretaker: Yes, Mr. President. Their suns do not set, like ours. There is daylight during their entire day, with the exception of a short time period where both suns hit the horizon. President: What is life like on Serpico? The caretaker: Mr. President, it is called Serpo, spelled Serpo. I think that will have to be given in a different level of briefings. Mr. Director. W.M. Casey: Yes, Mr. President, I think we are getting way ahead of ourselves. We have all that information about the visitor's planet, but we would have to present that information in a different briefing. President: Okay, all these levels. I guess, I'll have to get used to it. Does all classified information have these different levels? W.M. Casey: It is similar to the SIP briefing you were given in January. We have different levels of clearances and. President: No, I understand all that, Bill. I fully understand the different levels of clearances. I mean, what about the Soviets? What about the spy operations we have in Russia? Comparing the two, this alien information to that, are they on the same level? W.M. Casey: No, Mr. President. This information would be considered at the very top, whereas our spying operation inside Russia would be considered at a parallel level, but not the same. President: Like apples and oranges. Okay, I see. I guess this is more that can be explained in one sitting. What about the travel from Serpo to Earth? The caretaker: Well, Mr. President, the distance from Earth to Serpo is about 40 light years. They can't travel that in about 9 of our months. I am no scientist, but as I mentioned earlier, they can travel that great distance by means of space tunnels. They seem to be able to bend the distance from one point in space to another. Just how they do this, must be explained scientifically. President: Okay, well, very interesting. Are the laws of physics on their planet the same as our planet? The caretaker: Not exactly. There seem to be a little different laws, especially when it comes to the movement of their planet in relationship to their two suns. Our scientists don't understand it because it defies some of our laws of physics. President: Do they use nuclear power, or what type of power do they have in those ships? The caretaker: Mr. President, we understand very little about their propulsion system. There seem to be two different propulsion systems. One they use within our atmosphere and one they use once they exit our atmosphere. They do not have nuclear power. Their propulsion system does have some type of low-level radiation emissions, but nothing that would endanger us. It isn't like our radiation, but we call it radiation because we have nothing else to compare it with. President, have these aliens visited other places on Earth? The caretaker, again, Mr. President, that would be in a different level of discussion. President, I'm getting tired of hearing that answer, but I understand. W.M. Casey, Mr. President, the Soviet Union has had their contacts with these aliens. We have a great deal of intelligence that would indicate the Soviets had their Roswell, so to speak. What they know is about the same as we know. They had some bodies back in the late 50s, but our intelligence would indicate the species of aliens were different. President, okay, well, then Bill, that presents a very disturbing feeling for me. Are you telling me there are different races or species, as you said, visiting Earth at the same time? W.M. Casey, caretaker, take that question. The caretaker, yes, Mr. President, but I hesitate to state the reason. We should have that discussion in a different meeting. President, just answer the simple question of how many different species, don't go into details, since I'm sure it is at a different level, as I've been hearing all morning. The caretaker, I am sorry Mr. President if I upset you. President, no, caretaker, don't feel that way. I am not upset. No, you are all of my advisors. As President, I must listen to you and take your advice. I am not upset. I'm sorry for giving you that impression. Can you tell me how many different species have visited us? The caretaker, Mr. Director? W.M. Casey, go ahead, caretaker, answer the President's question. The caretaker, at least 5. President, are they all friendly? The caretaker, Mr. Director? W.M. Casey, Advisor number 1, would you like to step in here? Advisor number 1, Mr. President, that is a very difficult question to answer. There are many parameters that we follow to evaluate the threat. However, we have little intelligence on 4 of the 5. We have plenty of intel on the E, B, E, and S, G, they've given us everything we asked for. They have also helped us to understand the other 4 species. I'm afraid to say, Mr. President, and please don't misunderstand my words, but we think one of the species is very hostile. W.M. Casey, Mr. President, do you wish for us to continue on this track or would you like something more private, as to the discussion of this topic? President, for Christ's sakes, I am the President of the United States. I should know if we are endangered by some threat from outer space. If you have something to say about a threat posed by this one species of aliens, then I want to hear it. W.M. Casey, Mr. President, we have intelligence that would indicate this one species of aliens have abducted people from Earth. They have performed scientific and medical tests on these humans. To the best of our knowledge, no humans have been killed. But, as Advisor number 1 stated, the intelligence is from witnesses and we haven't thoroughly evaluated this intelligence. We have captured one of these hostile aliens. This gets into some very sensitive areas, Mr. President. I strongly suggest we end this discussion and move on to any further questions you might have and then get back to this. I don't think we are prepared to provide you with accurate answers to your questions about the potentially hostile aliens at this time. President, okay, but expect this to be given to me as soon as possible. I want to know everything about these hostile creatures so we should start forming policies on how to deal with them. Advisor number 1, do we have operational war plans on this? Advisor number 1, yes, Mr. President, we have war plans on all potential threats to our country. President, please, let us not forget the world. If these creatures attack some other country, we would have to help. Advisor number 1, Mr. President, we have absolutely no evidence that this particular alien race has any plans to attack the United States of America or planet Earth. President, I guess we really got off the original subject. But I want to know of any threats. Don't hide anything from me. Is that understood? W.M. Casey, yes, sir. Advisor number 1, yes, sir, Mr. President. We will never hide any information about a potential threat to our country or the world. You receive daily intel briefings and you will continue to, and we can update that briefing with any potential threat from this area. President: Okay, let us continue. How many other presidents received this briefing? The caretaker: Mr. President, I have briefed President Nixon, Ford and you. President Carter was never given the entire briefing. I have no answer as to why he wasn't given the briefing. President: Well, knowing that guy, he probably couldn't understand it being from Georgia. But that is just a dry joke. Laughter heard in room. Advisor number 1, Mr. President, I can give you some details of an incident that occurred inside the Soviet Union in 1970. W.M. Casey, do we want to go there? Advisor number 4, may I say something, Mr. Director? W.M. Casey, go ahead. Advisor number 4, step in. Advisor number 4, I think this particular incident inside the Soviet Union will give the President an example of what the world has and will experience in the future. There is no way we can control visitors from outer space from traveling to Earth and visiting our planet. Some astronomers find it difficult to believe that these aliens can find Earth. We are on the outer reaches of our galaxy. Our Sun is one of hundreds of thousands of such stars within our galactic neighborhood. But the EBENS found us, they found Earth. And we are not the only country on Earth that has been visited by the EBEs. Now, as for the other 4 species, we know they have visited us in the past and will visit us in the future. We are like a petri dish within the universe. We are a diverse planet. We must be very interesting to other extraterrestrials. I'm sure other intelligent life forms in the universe must have some sort of communications among the sentient life forms. Maybe they broadcasted that Earth has intelligent life. Maybe that is why we are being visited. Getting back to advisor number 1, regarding the incident inside the Soviet Union, Mr. President, there are many such sightings all over the world. We must understand that the visitors can roam our planet at will without us doing much about it. However, I personally believe that we must prepare for the eventual day when some hostile life form decides to take over our planet. We must be prepared. I hope you understand why I said what I said, Mr. President. President: Yes, indeed, advisor number 4, very well said. I agree with you. I guess all of those sightings, well, some of them are real. I mean, we are being visited, today, now, in this time period. W.M. Casey: Yes, Mr. President, we are. President: Okay, advisor number 1, please continue, we cut you off. Advisor number 1, okay, thanks, Mr. President. As I was saying, actually a series of incidents occurred over about a week. Our intelligence gathering stations inside and outside of the Soviet Union picked up voice transmissions between Soviet air defense pilots and ground controllers regarding a number of UFOs which were being chased by Soviet pilots. The incident started in central Siberia and ended over the Black Sea. Literally thousands of Soviets observed the UFOs and at least 20 different fighter pilots chased the UFOs. The Soviets attempted on 2 occasions to shoot down the UFOs, but to no avail. That is probably the best evidence that these things are happening over the Soviet Union. We think these UFOs were the hostile ones. We call them hostile because they tend to land, take humans, conduct experiments on them and then release the humans. Their spacecraft are different in design than the EBEs. President: Wait 1 minute, advisor number 1, you mean to say that we have one of their spaceships? Or are you telling me we have some other evidence of their spaceships? Advisor number 1, Mr. President, we have photographs of their ships. This gets a little complicated because some of our intelligence comes from the EBEs. President: You mean from the EBE guy? Advisor number 1, yes, but from other sources of information connected to the EBEs. W.M. Casey: Mr. President, we'll have to go to those dreaded words you don't like, higher levels if you wish. President: No, well, no, oh, okay, just give me this briefing first. We can schedule the higher level ones later. Advisor number 1, simply speaking, we know the difference between the EBE spacecraft and the hostile alien spacecraft. President, do you have a name for them, I mean the bad ones? The caretaker, Mr. President. We call the hostile aliens simply that, HAV, meaning hostile alien visitors. MJ-12 placed that code on them back in the 50s. President, you mean to say, these HA-verses have been visiting us and kidnapping our people since the 50s? The caretaker, Mr. President, yes, well, they have been around since then, Director Casey. W.M. Casey, Mr. President, we have some indication that they might have been doing this for some time. But we really have to consider all of the evidence, listed in our reports, and compare that to some of the open source information. There are always humans that will exaggerate and just tell lies, compared to the real ones or the ones who were abducted and subjected to experiments. We have to sort through the differences and place some aside and look at the real evidence of abductions. But we can be sure that the EBEs have never done this. They are extremely peaceful and would not harm a living soul, including animals. Advisor number 1, I suggest we go ahead and give the President the information on them. Advisor number 4, I agree. W.M. Casey, okay, give the President the names, caretaker. The caretaker, names, the technical names? W.M. Casey, yes, okay, but we have to be real sure that this information stays here. We cannot allow this to leave this room. The caretaker, okay, thank you. Mr. President, the 5 species are called, EBEs, archgloids, quadloids, heptaloids, and trantiloids. These names were given to the aliens species by the intelligence community, specifically MJ5. The EBEs are friendly, the trantiloids are the dangerous ones. President, my God, just knowing we have names for these things are amazing. Which one do we capture? W.M. Casey, Mr. President, we have a trantiloid, but it is dead. We captured it in 1961 in Canada and we had it in captivity until 1962, when it died. We'll show you a photograph, caretaker? The caretaker, Director, I don't have one with me. But, I will get one couriered over to us. W.M. Casey, Mr. President, we can provide that during our next meeting regarding this subject. President, okay, let's continue. The caretaker, Mr. President, getting back to my presentation, all of our collected information is safely contained in a number of locations. The caretaker, okay, Mr. President, I'll keep this in general terms. I just want to assure you that all of the information is safely tucked away at secure locations, including the devices and flying craft that we have. President, may I assume one of these places is located in California? The caretaker, some of the items are tested at Livermore and flown around Edwards, but they are kept in Nevada. President, okay, yes, I think I was briefed on sensitive military installations back in February, west of Las Vegas, I guess. The caretaker, yes, Mr. President. We call it the Groom Lake Complex. President, okay, I was told about that. The same place we have Soviet fighter jets? The caretaker, yes, Mr. President, the same place. May I continue? President, yes, by all means, do. The caretaker, in order to protect all this information and the fact that the United States government has evidence of our planet being visited by extraterrestrials, we developed over the years a very effective program to safeguard the information. We call it Project Dove. It is a complex series of disinformation operations by our military intelligence agencies to disinform the public. As you know, Mr. President, we have some highly classified aircraft. In order to keep these aircraft secret, we tend to convince, at times, the public and press that maybe UFOs are real in order to make the public think what they are seeing are actually UFOs instead of our own secret aircraft, even though we know maybe some of the sightings are of actual UFOs. As I said before, this is complicated, but it is a form of counterintelligence. We give the public some actual facts and let them run with it. The rest is taken care of by them. If you consider the first person who helped us with this disinformation program, Mr. George Adamski, back in the early 50s, and up to all of the movie productions of UFO-related movies. This helps the public to keep their minds open, but also allows us to keep our secret aircraft away from the public's knowledge. That includes some of the craft that were lent to us by the EBE's President. I always knew there was some form of cooperation between our government and the motion picture industry. I heard rumors over the years, even during my acting days. The caretaker, well, Mr. President, the first cooperative venture was the movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still. That was a cooperative venture with the United States Air Force and the movie industry. President, that movie, Close Encounters, was that one of them? I guess no Bonzo movies were involved. Loud laughter heard. W.M. Casey, no, laughing, Mr. President, I don't think, or should I say, I didn't think Bonzo came from outer space. More laughter. President, no, but some people could imagine it. The caretaker, yes, Mr. President, we provided the basic subject matter for that movie. President, was it based on a real incident? W.M. Casey, Mr. President. President, okay, Bill, I know what's coming, just forget my question for now. W.M. Casey, okay, caretaker, continue. The caretaker, thank you, Mr. President. In 1949, President Truman created 2 secret commissions. These commissions were to meet privately without recording any contents. The commissions were codenamed Adam and Eve. The first commission, Adam, was to study the idea of releasing some information to the public regarding our actual knowledge of UFOs and the 2 crash incidents. The findings of the Adam Commission consisted of the following statement: in this matter, public opinion must be recognized as a factor of considerable importance, even if clearly affirmative might have the effect of placing before the American people a moral question of vital historical significance at a time when the full security impact of the question had not become apparent. If this decision is to be made by the American people, it should be made in the circumstances of an actual disclosure of the existence of space beings who had visited Earth. In other words, the American public might hesitate to believe the existence of space beings unless the American government showed proof. This was an actual quote from the classified document dated December 1, 1949. The second commission, Eve, concerned the use of atom bombs to repel a space alien attack. What's interesting in this statement was the decision by President Truman to proceed at a record pace on the production of atomic weapons that could be released in space. The Commission predicted it would take the United States 10 years to develop such a delivery system. President Truman wanted it developed in five years. In fact, in 1959, the first Atlas ICBMs were targeted for deep space. SIP plans were developed to counter any space-based alien invasion. Mr. David Lilienthal, the first Atomic Energy Commission chairman, was in charge of the production of enough atomic weapons to counter any anticipated alien threat. The commission was tasked with developing a delivery system that could send a Mark III atomic weapon into space. In the 1948 to 1949 time frames, there were fewer than 50 atomic bombs in the arsenal and none of these were assembled. The Mark III plutonium bombs, like the one dropped at Nagasaki, Japan, took 39 men more than 2 days to assemble the bomb. The bombs were so large and heavy, each weighed 10,000 pounds, and that a delivery system must be capable of sending this heavy weapon into space. As a result of Eve's Commission findings, atomic weapons production was increased at a record pace. Of course, this buildup coincided with the Soviet Union's buildup. It was easy to convince the American public that our buildup was caused by the Soviet Union's buildup. Mr. President, in 1964, we were able to have our very first controlled encounter with the EBE's. Let me first give you the background. EBE was a mechanic, not a scientist. He was still able to teach us some of the EBE language. Their language was very difficult for our linguists to learn because it consisted of tones, not words. However, We were able to translate some basic words. E, B, E, showed us their communications device. It was a strange looking device that had 3 parts. Once assembled, the device sent out signals, something like our Morse code system, although there was a problem. During the crash in 1947, one part of this communication system was broken. EBE was unable to repair it until our scientists found some items that could be used in place of the broken parts. Once the communication device was repaired, EBE sent our messages. We had to trust EBE as to the contents of those messages. You can imagine what some of our military commanders thought of this. EBE could be sending out a distress call that could result in some invasion. But that, of course, never happened. EBE continued to send messages until his death. But once he died, then we were on our own. We were able to crudely operate the device. We sent several messages out over a 6-month period, 1953. But we did not receive any return messages. President, excuse me, did EBE receive any return messages? The caretaker, getting back to the messages, Mr. President, EBE sent out 6 messages. One letting his home planet know that he was alive and his comrades were dead, another explaining the 2 crashes, the third was a request to be rescued, the fourth was a message suggesting a meeting between his leaders and our leaders. The last message suggested some form of an exchange program. W.M. Casey, Mr. President, we'll go into that later. President, not understood, what, the exchange program? W.M. Casey, yes, Mr. President. We can give you another couple of hours on that subject. President, we had one? W.M. Casey, can I speak to you privately, please, Mr. President? President, okay, yes, you mean now? Not understood. W.M. Casey, well, let us put this one on the back burner and go on with the remainder of this briefing. President, okay. The caretaker, Mr. President, we don't think he did, but we could not be entirely certain. But, our scientists fine-tuned our efforts over the next 18 months and finally sent 2 messages in 1955 that were received. We received a reply. We were able to translate about 30% of the message. We turned to several linguist specialists from several different universities and even several from foreign universities. Finally, we were able to translate most of the messages. We decided to reply in English and see if the EBE could translate our language easier than we could theirs. President, what did the messages say? The one we received from the EBEs. So, I guess they didn't get the messages sent by EBE? Or did it take that long to respond? Oh, yes, EBE died before we got those messages, never mind. The caretaker, Mr. President, the first message we received acknowledged our message and asked questions about the crew of the 2 missing craft. It also gave a series of numbers that we think were some type of coordinates. President, okay, so they wanted to know the coordinates of the crash sites on Earth? I'm sure they wanted to know about their crew. Did we tell them all but one was dead? No, wait, I'm sure when EBE sent his messages that is probably the first thing he sent. Was EBE a military person or what? The caretaker, Mr. President, we believe EBE was a member of their Air Force or maybe something like NASA. President, okay, please continue. The caretaker, thank you, Mr. President. Finally we were able to translate most of the messages. As I said, we decided to respond in English. Approximately 4 months later, we received a reply in broken English. Sentences contain nouns and adjectives, but no verbs. It took us several months to translate the message. We then sent EBE our typed English lessons in a series of one-sheet formats. Without going into the technical description of the EBE communications device, it was like a television screen and a keypad, but the pad contained several different EBE characters depending on the number of times you held down one key. We were able to transpose our English typed words into the second part of the device, which was similar to our facsimile transmission system. It took our scientists some time to perfect this, but it worked. 6 months later, we received another English message. This time it was clearer, but not clear enough. Were confusing several different English words and still failed to complete a proper sentence. President, gee, I do that all of the time, sounds of laughter. I just cannot imagine how an alien race could view our language. We have thousands of different languages on Earth and they probably have just one on their Serpo planet. That is truly amazing. The caretaker, yes, Mr. President, I cannot imagine living on a planet with just one language. But we were able to provide the basic skill level for them to communicate in English. It took time, but they realized our efforts. In one message, they provided us with a form of the E alphabet with the equivalent English letter. Our linguists had a very difficult time figuring this out. The written E language was simple characters and symbols, but our linguists had a difficult time comparing the two written languages. Over the next 5 years, we were able to perfect our understanding of the E language somewhat and the ES were able to better understand English. However, we had a major problem. Trying to coordinate a date, time and location for an E landing on Earth. Even though we could basically understand some and the in us could understand some English, we could not understand their time and date system and they could not understand ours. We sent them our Earth's rotation schedule, revolution, date system, etc. For some reason the ES never understood this. In return, the ES sent us their system, which was difficult for our scientists to understand because we had no reference to their planet. The ES did not explain any astronomical date of Serpo or their system. We then decided to just send pictures showing Earth, landmarks and a simple numbering system for time periods. We had many problems trying to send pictures using their facsimile system. We couldn't be sure they were receiving what we sent. We had a lot of trial and errors in doing this. We received back some strange messages from the ES, basically big question marks regarding what we sent them as to the pictures. We then decided on narrowing any future landing location for them to the location of their crash in New Mexico. We concluded they must have that location. We are sure ES sent that to his home planet prior to his death. We did find some star charts, well, as we call them, in both crashed spacecraft. They were difficult to understand because they were on a block that we later figured out went into a certain panel on the crashed craft's instruments. Once the panel was in place, the board showed a star system. In fact, we were able to fit all the found boards into the panel and view many different star systems. We then put to work our astronomers in deciphering the star systems. It didn't take them very long to determine the various star systems. We also found several strange spots on the star charts. We concluded these spots were where the travel space tunnels that ES described were located. Our astronomers compared the different star charts and found that they were not consecutive. Meaning that one star chart was from one part of the universe and the next was a chart closer to their home system. Our scientists concluded the spots on the chart were a form of shortcuts from one point of space to another. Some of our top astronomers were briefed into the program in order to study the charts. I'm sure they were given only the minimum amount of information they needed, something like a need-to-know program. President, I have listened intently to this briefing. I have many questions, which I realize traverses several different layers of secrecy. I don't want to mix up the different layers. But I can see how government bureaucracy exists. That is one thing I can probably change as president. Bill, let's go to the next layer. W.M. Casey, Mr. President, do you want the same people involved? President, yes, let's just continue. W.M. Casey, okay, caretaker, take over. The caretaker, thank you. When E. was alive, he showed us two devices. One was a communication system and one was an energy device. The communication system did not work without the energy device. Eventually, a scientist from Los Alamos figured out the two systems and connected them. After E.B.E. died, we were able to send transmissions, as I said earlier. E.B.E. built up a strong friendship with a U.S. Army major, who was his guardian. The two of them decided that one of E.B.E.'s first messages, of the 5 sent, was a request for an exchange program between the E.B.E. and our military personnel. Remember I mentioned six messages. The 6 consisted of landing coordinates for Earth. That information wasn't clearly documented back then. We are not sure of the exact chain of events between E.B.E. and the Major. As I said earlier, we were able to eventually communicate with the E.B.E.'s. Over a period of a few years, we could send and receive information. We finally received a startling message from the E.B.E.'s. They wanted to visit Earth, retrieve their spaceman bodies and meet with Earthlings. They provided a time, date and location. We figure that the E.B.E.'s were continually visiting Earth and had probably mapped it. However, the date was about 8 years in the future. Our military figured something was wrong and that maybe the E.B.E.'s were confusing Earth time with E.B.E.n time. After a long series of messages, it was determined the E.B.E.'s would land on Earth on Friday, April 24, 1964. President, just how did we figure the date? The caretaker, Mr. President, these messages occurred over a period of several years. By this time, we both had a working knowledge of the other seasons, which was based on the Earth's rotation, which also figured into our time periods. We had a working knowledge of their 40-hour days. They were a little smarter than us, being able to comprehend our language and our time periods. President, okay, that makes sense. But how did you understand the aliens' language? The caretaker, Mr. President, we did have a basic understanding of their language. We could understand basic words and symbols. They understood more of our language than we did theirs. President, okay, then what happened? The caretaker, well. W.M. Casey, Mr. President, this is where things get very interesting. The caretaker, our government, specifically, MJ-12 met in secret to plan the event. Decisions were made, then changed many times. We had just about 25 months from the time we finally received their message of the date to prepare for their arrival. Several months into the planning, President Kennedy decided to approve a plan to exchange a special military team. The USAF was tasked as the lead agency. The USAF officials picked special civilian scientists to assist in the planning and crew selection. The team member selection process was the hardest to accomplish. Several plans were suggested and then changed. It took months for the planners to decide on the selection criteria for each team member. They decided that each member must be military, single, no children and a career member. They had to be trained in different skills. W.M. Casey, caretaker, let's just go into the general stuff here. I don't think the president wants to know every single minute detail. The caretaker, Mr. President, a team of 12 men were selected. However, during this time period, President Kennedy died. The nation was shocked, as you know. President, yes, everyone was shocked. I can understand what must have happened during the project when John died. The caretaker, President Johnson continued the program. When it came time for the meeting, we were ready. The landing occurred in New Mexico. We had everything prepared. We had a hoax landing location just in case it was leaked. The landing occurred and we greeted the E.B.E.'s. However, a mix-up happened. They were not prepared to accept our exchange personnel. Everything was placed on hold. Finally in 1965, the E.B.E.'s landed in Nevada and we exchanged 12 of our men for one of theirs. President, one? Why just one? W.M. Casey, Mr. President, this wasn't clearly documented in the reports that we read. President, one, was this their ambassador? W.M. Casey, well, something like that. We just called it TBE2. We'll discuss that later. The caretaker, Mr. President. Our team of 12 went to the EBE planet for 13 years. The original mission called for a 10-year stay, however, because of the strange time periods on their planet, the team stayed 3 additional years. 7 returned in 1978. 2 died on the planet and 2 decided to stay. Note, team member number 308, team pilot number 2, died of a pulmonary embolism en route to Serpo on the 9-month journey. 11 arrived safely. President, okay, this is just amazing. I can see, about that movie. The movie was based on a real event. I saw that movie. 12 men left, along with Richard Dreyfuss. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977. W.M. Casey, Mr. President, yes, the movie was similar to the real event, at least the last part of the movie. President, okay, a lot to digest. I want to hear about the hostile ones. Advisor number 1, Mr. President, may I step in here? President, by all means, Advisor number 1, do. Advisor number 1, well, Mr. President, the hostile alien species is responsible for abducting some humans. We can clearly prove some 80 Americans were abducted from about 1955 until the present, the last known one in July of last year 1980. We have a special military intelligence unit keeping track of these abductions. We have FBI agents attached, to assist us when needed. We have NSA and in some instances, CIA personnel helping. Unfortunately, we don't have the technology to know when these hostiles will abduct. We get the information afterwards. We interview the victim and place them under hypnotic trances. Some of the victims remember the entire event without hypnosis, while others need hypnosis to relate what happened. We haven't found one single death directly related to the hostile aliens. We have had deaths that were attributed to the abductions, suicides. We recorded 5 of them. But, Mr. President, these are the abductions we know about. We have no idea how many other abductions are occurring in this country or around the world. These hostile aliens are pretty sneaky. They seem to appear and disappear, which is beyond our technical understanding. They also seem to float or defy gravity. We have actual photographs of them doing this. We have a classic abduction incident that was recorded by military intelligence personnel. It happened in 1979 near a military base. President, where? Advisor number 1, in New Mexico. President, what's with New Mexico? The aliens seem to like that state. Do we know why? The caretaker, excuse me, may I speak? President, yes, caretaker, step in. The caretaker, New Mexico is similar to the home planet of the EBES, since we do not know which planet the Trantiloids come from. W.M. Casey, wait, advisor number 4? Advisor number 4, I think we do. I think the EBES gave us that information. We know the star group. It is close to our solar system, well, I mean in astronomical terms. Maybe 20-25 light years away. They are actually closer to us than the EBES are. Note from Victor, the homeworld of the the Trantiloids, is the 3rd planet out from the star Epsilon Eridani in the constellation Eridanus at 10.5 light years away. Although somewhat cooler and fainter than our Sun, it is very similar. Hal's friend, advisor number 4, was mistaken on the distance, an easy error to make given the voluminous amount of information on this subject matter alone. Anonymous. President, so that means they can travel like the EBES travel. I mean using those black holes or whatever you call them? Advisor number 4, yes, Mr. President, they can travel in the same fashion as the EBES, however, according to the EBES, the Trantiloids use a different form of propulsion. Something like matter versus antimatter. President, and that means? Advisor number 4, Mr. President, basic physics. W.M. Casey, Mr. President, do you want to go into the physics of this? President, oh, no, I don't think I understand it. Advisor number 4, I was just going to say that we know that when matter is placed next to antimatter, there is a great deal of energy released. If one could harness that into a propulsion system, that would be great. But we don't have the capability to do that. President, do we have one of their spaceships? The caretaker, yes, well, partially. A crashed one. President, okay, can we or do we have the technical knowledge to understand it? W.M. Casey, no, Mr. President, we don't. President, we can make atomic bombs, go to Mars, and we can't understand their science? W.M. Casey, Advisor number 4? Advisor number 4, Mr. President, their technology is probably 1,000 years more advanced than ours, maybe even more. They have different materials to work with. Some of their materials are not found on this planet. President, what do you mean, like iron or elements? Advisor number 4, yes, Mr. President. We found many metals and other things that are not found on this planet. Maybe they have more than 104 elements, or maybe they are different than ours. President, the hostile ones or the E.B.E.S.? Advisor number 4, Mr. President, that goes for each species, although the E.B.E.N.S. do have similar elements as those found on Earth. But the Trantaloids have strange materials, nothing like those found on Earth. These aliens can imitate humans. They can look like blonde humans. However, they are not blonde, but ugly-looking insects. President, insects, did you say that? Advisor number 4, yes, do you have a photograph? The caretaker, yes, hold on. W.M. Casey, they are pretty nasty looking. President, well, they would stand out. Advisor number 4, no, Mr. President, as I said, they can imitate looking like humans. President, how in the world do they do that? It took a lot of makeup to make me look good in the movies. Loud laughter heard. Advisor number 4, well, Mr. President, I can assure you they don't use makeup, at least not like we would. They have the ability to change their bodies. As I said before, they are 1,000 years ahead of us in technology and probably every other science. President, they can be killed? Advisor number 4, yes, they are just flesh and blood, like a human body. They can be killed. But their spaceships have a force field around them. They can be shot down, but it takes some doing on our part. W.M. Casey, Mr. President, we have to use a small-style nuclear missile to shoot them down, but we haven't actually done that yet. We have experimented in Nevada on the captured craft we have of theirs. President, my God, I hope we haven't used atomic missiles. What does that mean? I have to give that order. Advisor number 1, excuse me, but Mr. President, no, we haven't used any nuclear missiles to shoot down any alien flying craft. I think Advisor number 4 and the director mean that if we had to shoot one down, for instance, if a group of them attacked us. President, is that likely? Advisor number 1, no, I don't think so. President, can we intercept their radio transmissions? Do we know their language? Advisor number 1, we know or we can recognize their language, which is entirely different than the E.B.E.S. They use a very high-band radio system. But they have different frequencies and it is difficult for NSA to track them. President, maybe we should call Captain Kirk? Loud laughter, oh, a little humor is good in any situation. Loud laughter. Advisor number 1, okay, Mr. President, I'll call Scotty. More laughter. President, yeah, maybe, Gene Roddenberry knows. Advisor number 1, our air defenses are as best prepared as we can be against any form of an attack by this group. President, how do we do that? I mean, our pilots. Do they know? Advisor number 1, not exactly. But we have a system to cover any threat. President, a war plan? Advisor number 1, like I said earlier, yes, Mr. President, We do have war plans just for this event or possible event. President: Okay. Well, I think that is enough for one day. Bill: Set something up for tomorrow to finish this. W.M. Casey: Okay, Mr. President. I'll get with advisor number 2 and Michael Deaver. President: I want to thank everyone for a very thorough briefing. I was educated beyond belief. I will have a different attitude every time I look up in the sky. Meeting ends.